Hi there, my name is Christy Spence and I'm one of the Science Extension teachers. This video will give you some information about Science Extension, what the subject's like, what the type of things that you'll study. Um, so just to start, this is an extension subject, so it's one unit and it's in Year 12 only. Prerequisite for this subject is that you have to have done a science in Year 11 and you need to be continuing with the science in Year 12. You can do a number of sciences and science extension. They go really well together. So this year we have students that are doing one science, two sciences, or three sciences and science extension. So a good place to start might be to describe who might want to study science extension. The most obvious person for me is the students who want to start doing science now. They're interested in doing their own project now, and so they can become a scientist right now. Also, I recommend it to anyone who's really enjoying one of their current science subjects at the moment. This subject gives you the chance to explore a particular area of passion in your subject, and it counts for the HSC. So you get to do your passion for the HSC, for grades, for your ATAR, and it will all contribute. This subject is not exclusive to just the highest ranking science students. This subject suits people with a passion for science. I also recommend anyone planning to do a science degree, this course is really well aligned to doing a science degree and some of the content in first year science. I've had some students who did science extension last year come back to me and say they were so grateful that they did science extension because they got a real head start in statistics in particular, but also in the research skills that they need in their first year of science degree. I also think it's a wonderful subject for anyone who wants to stretch their brain, wants to ask more questions, loves having a good discussion and thinking deeply about the world around them. Ideally, you want to be able to work quite independently because you will be doing your own project independently. It's not something that we work on in class much. We do have some time in class, but you need to be working on it yourself independently. There are a number of reasons why you might want to study science extension. And as I've mentioned already, that it gives you a really good head start in university. The reason for this is you develop some scientific research skills. So part of your project, your own research project, you will be having to look at scientific journal articles and you'll have to develop literature review for your own project. And these skills are used in first year and all years of university. You'll also use data to find answers to your questions and the questions you're interested in. And we'll teach you the data and analysis techniques to do just that. We'll also teach you statistical techniques where you can actually test the relationships and how strong the relationships are in your project. These are real life science skills that you will use as a scientist in the real world. You will also learn to design and assess scientific studies. We'll be looking at other people's work and evaluating how good their design is. We'll also teach you how to write using current scientific conventions. I guess one of the biggest pulls to science extension is to do your own research. So as I mentioned before, you can explore your passion, but really important, you're developing a scientific portfolio. You're developing evidence that you can do science, and this could be really useful if you are being interviewed for a specific degree or a scholarship. These are really good things that you can talk about because they're things that you have done. If you're looking into becoming a data scientist, this would be a really good place for you to explore that because we have to use data and we have to analyze it, large data sets, and so you'll get some experience with that. You also use data to answer your own questions. A number of our students have been able to make contact and work with a mentor, and this is really valuable for making connections and networking into universities. You might find that quite useful. There's some content that we have to study in science extension. This course will also give you an understanding of how we came up with the scientific process that we use at the moment, why we have ethical considerations that we do use and how we use them. If you design your own project and you're going to use people, for instance, or animals, you will need to consider the ethics of your project and you will need to go through our ethics committee and get your project approved by the school and the ethics committee before you can conduct it. This is a really great experience if you're thinking of going into science in the real world, particularly sciences like medical sciences or psychology, for instance. We also look at how the relationship between society and science, and culture and science. These are areas in real life that are changing all the time, and it's a really interesting insight into the impact the society and culture have on scientific research. And of course, we look at how science can impact the world around us. For those of you who like a bit of philosophy, we go into the philosophy behind the scientific method. So this will give you some insight into the philosophy of science. If you are thinking about doing science extension, you're probably best starting to think now. You have to be able to choose an area that you want to do your research in. So I would suggest a few ways to do this. I would suggest that you look at the world around you and be very curious, ask questions, and when you ask questions, I recommend you try and work out how you might test those questions yourself. An example I have is a researcher was asking, do plants or can plants learn? And then she had to design an experiment to test that, and what a wonderful thing to have to try and test. She thought about, could they respond to light, and do they learn to respond to light? But we already know that plants do that, and so she needed to find a situation where plants had never been exposed to it before, and to see if they could learn how to respond to it. And what she decided to do was to drop the plants, because if you think about it in the real world, we don't see plants dropping very often. So she decided to design an experiment where she dropped the plants and saw if they learnt to respond to the dropping to protect themselves for future. Really interesting study. So you can think of your own study, just come up with a question and start thinking about it, testing your ideas. Become a skeptic. Think, how do they know that? And then maybe you can repeat someone else's study to be sure that they know what they know is right. I would also recommend that you start reading about science. The more you can read and the more you can learn yourself and expose yourself to the science that's going on in real life, the better you will be at the subject. Reading books about science. So for instance, The Greatest Show on Earth is about Darwin and the evidence of Darwin's theories. It's by Richard Dawkins. My favorite book is A Perfect Theory, which is about general relativity. I find that quite intimidating as a subject, but this book, I felt really I could learn about general relativity in a way that, in a level that I could understand. Also, I can't recommend Cosmos magazine or New Scientist enough. If you read a few of these, you'll start to get ideas of what you're interested in, and maybe some science that you want to go and do yourself. As part of this course, I recommend you listen to podcasts on science all the time. The Health Report on the ABC is a great podcast, and it's really good if you're doing bio as well. There's also Science Friction, which is a great podcast about some of the issues in science, and there's Occam's Razor, which has some lovely stories about science and insights into scientific research. Also, there's, of course, you can watch docos on science like Catalyst, David Attenborough, and Brian Cox docos. Chat to your science teachers, they may have some ideas. So if you can do something that will really help your HSC, that would be great. So for instance, doing something on disease if you do biology. Perhaps you could do some astronomy if you're doing physics, or look at some physical system and try and understand how it works. Those are great physics projects. Chemistry, you could use spectroscopy to look at some chemical compounds. And then, of course, there's Earth and Environmental Sciences, which have a huge amount of opportunities for projects in there too. So I hope that helped you make your decision. If you have any questions, you can come to the staff room and you can ask me or talk to your science teacher, and they will be able to help you.